propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome everyone to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today we are absolutely pleased and honored to have Dr. Ron Paul with us as our guest. Dr. Paul was a congressman representing the state of Texas and former presidential candidate under the Republican and Libertarian banner. Currently, he is the chairman and founder of the Ron Paul Institute and can be seen promoting the concept of liberty on the Ron Paul channel, an enterprise in which my wife and I heartily financially support as well. We are regular listeners and supporters of that endeavor. It's an internet-based show. We do encourage everyone to look into it, and you can find all the information at Ron Paul and ronpaul.com. Today we'll be discussing the Federal Reserve and U.S. foreign intervention. Dr. Paul, welcome to Liberty Talk Radio.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Great. Dr. Paul, about a year ago, it may have been a year ago, time seems to fly by as you get my age, you know. My wife and I drove down to Austin, University of Texas, I think it was the LBJ Library, with the, Young Americans for Liberty, and you gave a talk with Jacob Hornberger, a friend of mine.
Oh. Okay.
Was that last year? I guess it was last year.
Well, it's about a year ago. That's the way I'd remember it. Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm not. My mind is still with me, sort of. Okay, very good. Well, we really enjoyed that. I got an opportunity to say hello to you, but there was so many crowds, we didn't get a chance to speak. So I just wanted to let you know that I did meet you on one occasion before. Dr. Paul, I know you want to talk about, and so do I want to talk about the Federal Reserve and foreign intervention, a subject that is not really being discussed by our candidates for president. I mean, that's sort of a backroom, discussion, for the professionals, not for us people, But what I would like to talk about just for a second before we get into that is at one time you were promoting your son Rand Paul, and I was on the same side of the fence as you. Now, apparently, I have read that you are leaning towards of supporting Donald Trump for president, and I read somewhere that you had indicated that many of his policies were in line more with the libertarian philosophy. Could you just say a few words about that, please, or am I mistaken?
Well, I'm not sure I heard your whole statement, but I guess you were asking me about my relationship or my thoughts on Donald Trump.
Yes.
But no, I haven't endorsed any of the candidates. It's rather frustrating. So even though Trump on occasion says something that sounds interesting, I think he has a long way to go before he can be considered a libertarian or a non-interventionist.
Correct.
See, what tends to be the problem with the two candidates is they both are interventionists. Now, they do it differently, so it's a management style, and it's a technology thing that they're working on where and how much to do. But they're not talking about non-intervention when it comes to foreign affairs. And they certainly aren't talking about getting rid of the Federal Reserve. That'd be a little bit too much for the current politicians to handle. But eventually, we'll come to that. The Fed will self-destruct, and the foreign policy won't be affordable anymore, because that's usually what brings down empires, is overextension overseas. Right. It brought down the Soviet system in recent times, and it will certainly bring us down as long as we continue to do what we're doing overseas.
Do you think the reason why it is not broached in this campaign, it is beyond the thought process, I don't want to say maybe mentality is the right word, of the average voter saying Federal Reserve, well, that's reserved for those people who know about monetary policy. That's not for me to decide on, or for me to have an opinion on. That's reserved for those people that I vote for. They make those big decisions. Do you think there's some of that in there?
Yeah, I think there's part of that. At least the politicians want to believe it, and that gets them off the hook that they don't have to talk about it, because most politicians aren't interested in taking on the Federal Reserve System. But the truth of the matter is, it's not that complicated, because I've gone to a lot of college campuses. I've talked to young teenagers, and I maintain that they can understand printing money.
Right.
If you took monopoly money out and tried to use it, why wouldn't it work? So it's not that complicated. And if anybody has any inkling, liberal or conservative, that we can't afford some of these programs, liberals don't like all this warmongering and overseas stuff, and conservatives don't like it in other areas. But it wouldn't happen if you couldn't have a central bank that monetizes the debt, because they can't tax enough and they can't borrow enough, so they resort to the fact that, well, we'll let the Federal Reserve print the money. And we've been getting away with it for a long time because we've been very powerful militarily. There's a lot of confidence in what we do. And we did have a lot, most of the gold in the past, and we're militarily strong. So therefore, people accept our dollars, and they still do. But there's an end point to that. I think we're approaching it. In this last year, there were $346 billion dumped by central banks. So they're not doing this. But I don't think it's complicated. But they don't talk about it because conservatives conservatives haven't gotten rid of our deficits when they're in charge. Even back to Ronald Reagan's days, the deficit exploded.
That's right.
And right now, the conservatives are blaming Obama for spending money. Yeah, he did, and he signed it, and he spends like crazy. But who's in charge of the Congress? It's the Republicans. So they keep spending money too. But Democrats might want to spend it on something different than Republicans. But they make a deal. We're going to spend the money. We're not going to worry about deficits. And we'll pacify our constituents. We'll get reelected. And we'll just go ahead and perpetuate this system where the Fed will accommodate big government. But we've been doing it for a long time, and we're getting desperately close to the end of this because it eventually destroys confidence, and we'll have to change some.
Well, it seems that the mentality is that, well, since it's never happened in our lifetime, an actual currency collapse, it won't happen. So a little bit more won't hurt. So we can continue this gravy train because most likely nothing will happen. And anyone who thinks to the contrary is really a fearmonger.
They have to reject common sense to believe that, but that is the case. And conditions are such, and there's a subjectivity involved in this because perceptions are that if it's going to last, it does last for longer than it deserves. But even though we haven't suffered, a total collapse, we have suffered from a lot of inflation. Even today, there is a lot of inflation as you talk about cost of medical care and Obamacare especially, and the cost of buying weapons for the military, the cost of education, and all these things. It's very, very high, and it's going to get a lot worse. So, but even in our past history, we've had currency manipulation during the Civil War period. We destroyed the continental dollar at the beginning, and that was the reason the founders wrote in the Constitution that we couldn't print money, and only gold and silver could be legal tender. But there's been other countries, South American, Central American countries have destroyed themselves. Venezuela currently, and Zimbabwe just recently, and they're still involved in that. But this is much bigger than that. Those are smaller countries, and they may end their printing presses a little sooner than a big country. Ours has lasted longer, but that just means the collapse of this currency is going to be much bigger. We have never experienced anything like this in all of history, to have a single paper currency be the driving force around the world. And when confidence is lost, it has to reverse all the bad debt in the system, and that's where the pain and suffering comes from. But for now, the people and the countries around the world are going to still be accepting dollars. But the big question is, and nobody knows when that'll come, but the foundation of the monetary system has eroded away, and someday something's going to come along and just sort of push it over, and it's going to collapse, and that's when a lot of people are going to suffer.
I guess right now Russia must be just laughing, at us, saying, "Hey guys, we've been through that. You're replicating what we did, but only in spades. Guess what the outcome will be? Surprise." Mm-hmm. And they've got to be gloating over this at this point.
Yeah, and anybody who studies history, know exactly what you're talking about. And it's so ironic that it's back to Afghanistan. The whole story is how many nations have suffered in Afghanistan because the Afghan people don't like outsiders running their country. and they will continue to fight. And of course, the Soviets were brought to their knees with overextending themselves in Afghanistan. And today, that's part of our overextension. We're still there. We've been there for 15 years. Of course, we're in about 6 or 8 other countries over there as well, and there seems to be no end to it. It is one of the major events that brings down a currency, and that is overextension overseas. And we're certainly there, so it's just a matter of time.
You know, most people, the average Joe voter, is under the impression that the Democrats are the big spenders, as you know, as you dispelled, is incorrect. And today, but historically, it shows that the Republicans, over the years, have outspent the Democrats, and the Republicans consider themselves the party of fiscal responsibility. But no one looks at the record and to see who's really spending how much. And it seems like we're in this fantasy land where nothing that is said is actually true, and that what is true can't be accepted.
Yeah. And a major reason for that, of course, is our educational system, because so many people are taught, well, it's good policy. Debt isn't a problem. You just print more money and this sort of thing. So that's part of the reason. But they also have the media on their side, so they're not going to help us out to spread a message and talk about these risks. And the politicians aren't likely to, because then they would have to cut spending someplace. But I haven't heard any talk about cutting anything. Even Ronald Reagan admitted that he never intended to have any net cuts in anything. It's always, the deception is that they proposed future budgets. So if you cut the proposed increase, then you're slashing the budget and destroying the poor people. So if they want to increase some welfare program by $10 billion and you only increase it by $9 billion, you're some type of monster. If you have a military spending program, which is building weapons we don't need and just do it for the military-industrial complex, if you want to cut that, then, you don't care about the troops, you don't care about America, you don't want to defend the country, and they go on and on. But the truth is, the real defense of the country comes from a healthy economy and the protection of liberty. Right. But I don't think we hear too much of that talk in the campaign. I haven't heard it very often throughout my life by the conventional politicians.
Right, and it seems like if you want to be elected, just out-talk spending against the next guy. I mean, if you have a program, regardless of what it would cost, you may get more votes than cutting back a program, which exasperates the very condition that we're in right now.
Right, and conditions will eventually change because the cuts will be forced on us, but it won't be forced by politicians becoming more statesmanlike because they're always worried about what the immediate effect would be. But the cuts will come. What happens? The debt has to be reduced. They eventually do this, and the Fed actually, that's their policy, is try to get price inflation up, devalue the currency. So if the debt is $20 trillion and you can get 50% inflation, your real debt goes down by $10 trillion. So that's the way they want to do that. And that's the way things will happen. You hear it every single day today about pension funds. These pension funds are just outrageous, especially if it's related to a government pension fund. And there's no money in the bank. So the government will probably bail them out and print more money. Same way, there's no money in the bank for Social Security, but the checks are always going to come.
Right.
But if the checks are only buying about 2/3 or 1/2 of what they used to buy, that's a cutback. So the cutbacks have to be very deceptive because there would be riots in the street. If tomorrow you had an election and the person that says, well, I want to clean this mess up, and in order to do it, Social Security benefits are going to be reduced 5% a year for so many years until we get it solvent again. Well, no, they'd be run out on a rail. It wouldn't happen. So that's why you can expect this only to end with a cataclysmic type of economic problem, with runaway inflation and a lot more chaos. Because right now our productivity is going down, unemployment is going up, and the system is proven not to work.
Right.
But nobody's really challenging it. And the challenge, they said, well, sometimes they'll ask me, well, who is it that causes all this trouble? Like, which politician should be responsible for it? Was it FDR or who was it? It was Keynes. It was Keynes and his liberal buddies who conditioned people to believing this is good policy. You know, in the short run, counterfeiters, when they're not caught, they do well. People love it. They're counterfeiting money and passing it on. Everybody thinks they're rich. But when they're caught in it, then all of a sudden it's a different story. So the counterfeiters will eventually be caught, and that will be the government, and the people are going to be very unhappy. So we have to be prepared for what we're going to do, take care of ourselves as well as plan. My goal is to plan and teach people, you know, what the alternatives ought to be and what you need to do with monetary policy and why you have to change foreign policy and why you have to have a libertarian society where people live their own lives, take care of themselves, responsible for themselves, keep what they earn, and get the government out of our lives. And you know, the amazing thing is, under that system, you don't have to sacrifice. I read an article yesterday of why they were putting the burden on everybody, every single person. To solve this problem, everybody has to sacrifice. Well, no, you need to give people their liberty back again.
Right.
And that is not a sacrifice. All of a sudden, you have your property rights back and your voluntarism. You can lead your life as you choose. And you soon, even if you are out on your luck, you can soon become wealthy and take care of yourself if you have your freedoms to go and react. But you don't have to sacrifice. We've sacrificed way too much of our liberties. That's what's the whole story after 9/11. Great danger. We have to sacrifice our freedoms and our privacy in order for the government to make us safe and secure. And look at the result.
Yeah, I guess you know, are familiar with Gerald Celente, the trends forecaster.
Oh yes, yes.
And he always says that when all else fails in government, they take us to war. And he mentions this over and over again. And and you know, Gerald Celente and I actually lived on the same block in the Bronx, New York. As a little side note, by the way. And they bring us to war. It seems to me that no one wants to bite the bullet and correct the situation, because once someone takes that stance, then the public can say, you are to blame, Mr. So-and-so, for this recession, for this hyperinflation, for this whatever, for this the depression that we're going through. However, if they just let the system correct itself and we have hyperinflation, there's no one to blame. It's just that the blame goes to everyone from the consumer to the politician. So there seems to be a preference to allow the system to collapse on its own, and no one take hold of it or try to correct it, because they will be blamed for precipitating the collapse. Is that a little naive on my part?
Well, I think I get the gist of that, and because blaming everybody is easy. Blame the foreigners, you know, it's all the Chinese fault or the Mexicans' fault, and have somebody and find scapegoats all the time. But it's the bad ideas that causes the problem. If you follow bad ideas, you're going to have bad consequences.
Yeah.
But this is the big problem, is getting people to endorse something new and different. So the answer is not going to be found in the election tomorrow. We're not going to have any more answers than we had today. The answer can only be found, and this is where I've been encouraged, talking to a lot of young college kids, that they're very open to the libertarian message. They're very open to it because many of them, when they hear the truth, it makes sense to them.
Right.
It isn't. A lot of times, after I've given a talk, the young people will come up and say, you know, that it's just common sense what you're telling us, you know. But the trouble is they hear the contradiction, you know, from our government officials, from our media, from our university professors. Just think how the university professors now are pumping this cultural Marxism into their brains and doing all these crazy things.
Yeah.
But no, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of things going on, and we have to assume that it's worth the struggle. But there are some days when it can be pretty depressing. But like you mentioned, things are going to get worse, I believe, a long time before they get better.
Well, yeah, well, you know, I've read many articles, financial articles, on international monetary supply, etc., that indicates that Russia, China, and India are amassing large quantity of gold in the gold reserves. especially in the past 10 years. If you look at the chart, it almost goes straight up. But one country that is always absent in these reports is the United States. And yet, when we asked, you've asked the Federal Reserve, I know you were championing this, let's audit the Fed. How much do we have in gold reserves? And yet, that's supposed to be secret. I just don't understand that. And I don't think the public understands that. How we can talk about how much gold China has, but we can't talk about how much gold we have.
Well, they tell us what they are supposed to have. The big problem is they don't allow it to be audited.
Right.
You don't know where it is or what the commitments are, have they loaned it out, and this sort of thing. So that is a major problem. In this day and age, of course, the healthy thing going on now is the people are waking up and they don't believe hardly anything the government tells them anymore, which I think is good because they're less likely to be lulled to sleep, which has been the case over the many years. I think that I'm going to be going here in a couple of minutes, but if you had another question, I think I better wind down.
Okay, Dr. Paul, I think I've overextended your generosity right now. I've taken advantage of the time. In fact, I lost track of time. This is so interesting. If you'd like to just close it out, that's fine. Give us your final thoughts. I appreciate it.
Well, okay, I'm just delighted to be with you. I understand your program reaches a lot of people. They're interested in the liberty message, so that's obviously the thing that I participate in because I think that is where the answers are. They're not going to be, I worked in the political system, even though the political system wasn't where I thought I'd find the answers, and I did that only to try to reach more people. So reaching people, and everybody has a responsibility. In this day and age, this is something that's really going for us, whether it's radio programming, the internet, and all the things wasn't available in the 1950s and 60s when I was looking for information. You had to find a book, and that wasn't even easy to do. Today, there's many more opportunities, and they're out there. It's just a matter of somebody being creative and finding an audience and understand. It's up to us as individuals to understand what the freedom message is all about and why it's a moral principle that everybody has a right to their own life and liberty with one very basic rule, and that is you don't have a right to take other people's property and you don't have a right to hurt people. It would be a wonderful world if we just followed those rules.
Fine. Dr. Paul, thank you very much for taking your valuable time to be on Liberty Talk Radio. It's truly an honor, and I do hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. And today we had Dr. Ron Paul. That's the pinnacle of success, I guess. Till next time, stay well, stay tuned.